So, Soldier Boy was born in Pennsylvania on September 19, 1919, under the name Benjamin. The official backstory of Soldier Boy, released by Vought, was that he was born poor and learned the values of hard work, tenacity, and bravery while growing up on the streets. However, in reality, Benjamin was born into a wealthy home, raised by his strict and distant father, a prominent industrial magnate who owned half the steel mills in the state. However, in spite of his wealth and status, Ben's father was highly critical, overbearing, emotionally abusive, and neglectful to the point of total detachment, who often insulted his son by reminding Benjamin how much of a disappointment he is in his eyes, which is why he sent his son to boarding school at a young age, so that he could be straightened up and meet his expectations. Unfortunately, Benjamin struggled in boarding school and ultimately flunked out. In response to his failure, his father was disgusted by his son so much that he couldn't even bother to hit him, since that would require physical contact. Instead, he belittled his son, declaring that he was a disappointment in his eyes, unworthy to carry on the family name and be called a man, and these words marked Benjamin for life. During this time, he drank heavily and became an alcoholic. He often snuck to drink his father's collection of Manhattans since he was young. Later, Benjamin enlisted the US Army during World War II and volunteered among other human subjects to be experimented on with Dr. Frederick Vaught's field-tested Compound V by using his father's connections to the War Department. As a result, the experiments succeeded and he became one of the first strongest super soldiers in the whole world, nicknamed as Soldier Boy by Vought and publicized as America's first superhero. However, according to the legend's claims, Vought American utilized Soldier Boy primarily for war propaganda films and publicity shoots rather than deploying him to fight the Nazis, due to how much he was worth to the company. Consequently, it remains uncertain how much actual combat he experienced during the war, despite his own claims of actively participating, which could be valid given his exceptional combat skills that could also stem from Vaught's combat training courses. When the war finally concluded, Ben returned home to a hero's welcome, with ticker parades held across the nation in his honor. Despite all he's accomplished, his father once again expressed his disgust towards his son by calling him a cheater that took a shortcut the way he did by using Compound V, something a real man will never do according to his father's logic. In 1945, following the end of World War II, an executive order was drafted, presumably by President Harry S. Truman, to establish the date of April 28th as Soldier Boy Day, as a way of honoring his heroic efforts during the war. However, Soldier Boy intervened and had the day be known as National Superhero Day, as a way of honoring all superheroes instead. At some point, he met Stormfront during her time as Liberty, as the two of them founded Herogasm together in 1952. During the 1970s, Soldier Boy became the leader of the superhero team PAYBACK, where he would fight crime alongside Crimson Countess, Gunpowder, Swatto, Mindstorm, Black Noir, and the TNT Twins. In the fall of 1980, Jonah Vogelbaum called Benjamin to his lab and asked him to ejaculate his sperm into a cup so that they could study his genetics. Unbeknownst to Soldier Boy, Vogelbaum would use his sperm to create a baby who would eventually grow up to be the Homelander. On July 12, 1982, in Queens, New York, Soldier Boy and Swatto reportedly assaulted a homeless man in a park. The homeless man wanted to press charges against the two, but then the man mysteriously vanished. In 1983, Soldier Boy starred in the classic film Red Thunder about the Soviet-Afghan War. In 1984, Soldier Boy filmed an anti-drug ad that was approved by the Vought Ad Council. In the PSA, Soulja Boy warned people against taking drugs, claiming that anyone who takes drugs is a loser. However, he had several complications on set due to his spoiled attitude and quick temper, and also got remarks on his hypocrisy in making an anti-drug video despite the fact that he himself was an addict. In the same year, despite being publicly against drugs, Vought had Soulja Boy and the rest of PAYBACK participate in Operation Charlie, a clandestine CIA military operation that was funded by illegal cocaine trafficking and sought to back the right-wing Nicaraguan Contras against the communist, Soviet-backed Sandinistas. During the operation, Soulja Boy displayed a carefree yet arrogant and misogynistic attitude towards the handling officer, Lieutenant Army Colonel Grace Mallory. He made numerous passes at Mallory before she finally rebuffed him, and he reacted by calling her homophobic slurs. Later on, due to SWATO's carelessness, the Sandinistas and their Soviet allies were able to launch a surprise attack on Mallory's base. This, along with PAYBACK's incompetence and lack of training, led to the deaths of 116 of Mallory's men. So despite presenting themselves as a close-knit team, the truth was that Soulja Boy was hated by the other members of PAYBACK. So, PAYBACK used the Soviet attack as an opportunity to betray Soulja Boy. After fighting through swarms of enemies, Soulja Boy soon found himself ambushed by his own teammates, who launched a brutal attack against him. Although he put up a good fight, even managing to burn off some of Noir's face with a burning car and cause him brain damage with his shield, the team was successful in knocking Soulja Boy out by using Novichok gas and then handed him over to the Russians. After this incident, Vought covered up his death by claiming that Soulja Boy had died as a hero by sacrificing himself to stop a nuclear meltdown in Ohio. What no one in the US knew was that the Russians had decided not to kill Soulja Boy, or maybe they found out that they couldn't kill him. So, instead, the Soviet Union decided to see what could kill Soulja Boy. On January 24, 1986, while under Russian control, Soulja Boy was recorded and experimented on by Russian scientists, who state that the subject has extremely durable skin, including internal organs, and that he continues to exhibit high amounts of radiation. A scientist prepares to see if the same applies to his cornea and raises a blade up to cut his eye. However, Ben escapes his restraints and kills the scientist. In an attempt to escape, Soulja Boy runs for the door, but he is immediately knocked unconscious when the Russians flood the room with Novichok gas. Then, sometime in 1990, Soulja Boy was recorded and experimented on by the Russians again. They fired an AK-47 into his mouth and burned him with a torch, all of which failed to damage him. Other experiments intended to harm Soulja Boy included sulfuric acid cocktails, presumably along with various other exploratory procedures. Soulja Boy's body survived all of the experiments, but his mind was broken and he developed various mental illnesses. So before Soulja Boy was captured, he only had superhuman abilities like super strength, super hearing, extreme durability, and some other common superpowers. But after getting experimented on by the Russians, he gained some new abilities and got a significant power-up. Radiation generation. So after being exposed to high levels of radiation while being experimented on by the Russians, Soulja Boy's body appears to have started producing radiation on its own. This ended up effectively turning him into a walking nuclear reactor. Because of this, his body now emits high levels of radiation at all times. Due to this, there is a chance that his radioactive physiology makes him immune to both cold and hot temperatures. However, the amount of radiation that his body creates can also be affected by his emotional state. This can be seen when Huey's Geiger counter recorded increased levels of radiation when Soulja Boy was venting about his past and got very emotionally distressed in the process. When his PTSD is triggered, his emotional state can get out of control, causing him to lose control over his powers. This makes Soulja Boy extremely dangerous, as the explosions he generates are capable of destroying entire city blocks. When the boys attempted to put Soulja Boy back to sleep, his fear of being imprisoned again overwhelmed him, and he generated so much radiation that he started smoking. Due to the high amounts of radiation that he emits at all times, being near Soulja Boy for prolonged periods of time can even cause radiation poisoning. Radiated energy blasts. So after gaining the power of a nuclear reactor, Soulja Boy now possesses the ability to fire tremendously powerful blasts of radiation-infused energy from his upper torso. He can release the energy as a forward-facing beam, which lasts several seconds before his energy is depleted. He often sights the beam by changing his direction as the beam discharges, creating a wedge-shaped or omnidirectional wave of destruction. The beam is incredibly destructive and powerful enough to completely vaporize a normal human, reduce another soup to a charred corpse, and destroy multi-story buildings with ease. When he unleashed it at Herogasm, the beam was strong enough to nearly destroy most of the TNT twins' home, as well as kill a dozen attendants, which included Soups. An even larger blast, which he attempted to detonate inside Vought Tower, would have been powerful enough to destroy the entire skyscraper and kill almost everyone inside. His special ability. So Soulja Boy's radiation blasts are not just strong, but they are incredibly unique because of their special properties. So it appears that Soulja Boy's ability to produce radioactive beams of energy is powerful enough to burn the entirety of Compound V from the bloodstream of a soup, effectively killing them, or in the case of Kimiko, Maeve, and the attendants of Herogasm who survived, turning them back into normal human beings. However, this did not prevent them regaining their powers, as shown when Kimiko later regained her powers after being injected with Compound V again. But still, this ability to completely erase Compound V from a soup's body is probably the most overpowered ability so far. It is also shown that if a soup had powers that temporarily altered their form and then had their powers removed by Soulja Boy, they would be permanently stuck in this form afterwards. This was shown in the case of Termite, who was stuck in his shrunken form after the Herogasm explosion. Other than his new superpower, he was also gifted PTSD by the Russians. So basically, Soulja Boy is traumatized by the Russian torture and experiments he endured for almost 40 years. One of his known triggers is a Russian song called Escape, which was played while he was being experimented on. When reminded of his trauma, he is emotionally overwhelmed and tends to lose control of his powers, particularly of his new energy blast power. Furthermore, he refuses to admit to having PTSD, which was called shell shock in his time. As a coping mechanism, the boys supply him with heavy amounts of cannabis to calm his nerves and block his triggers. This seemed to work on him, but it also increased his paranoia as a side effect. Why doesn't he fly? So Homelander is Soulja Boy's biological son, and he has the ability to fly. Then there is Ryan, who is Homelander's son and Soulja Boy's grandson, and even he can fly. But unlike his son and grandson, Soulja Boy does not have the ability to fly. A simple reason for this is because Soulja Boy was not born with Compound V in his body, like Homelander and Ryan. Having been born with Compound V definitely gives Soups superior abilities, and Soulja Boy got his powers when he nearly reached his adulthood. So his body was probably not suitable enough for some complex superpowers like flying or changing body size. He could have gained flying ability if he had mutated and grown a pair of wings, but that would have ruined his appearance. Another question that is asked very often about Soulja Boy and Stormfront is that if they are immortal, and it's because they haven't aged and even after decades are still in their prime. So the simple answer is no, Soulja Boy and Stormfront are not immortal, and it's proved because Stormfront is already dead. Like Stormfront, Soulja Boy is extremely durable, but he isn't immune to physical harm, and it was proved in his fight against Homelander, which means he can be killed. And he doesn't even have advanced regeneration powers like Kimiko, so if he gets a severe injury, he might not be able to heal it. The only thing that makes him look immortal is his age, because it looks like he didn't age a single day in the past few decades. The reason for this is simply his slowed aging, which basically means he is going to age extremely slow after he reached his prime, which basically allows him to stay in his prime for decades. And I'll not be surprised if Homelander and Ryan also have this slow aging ability, and their ability might be better than Soulja Boy's because they have better genetics than him. So yeah, that's all for this video, and thanks for watching.